سلام على من اتبع الهدى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة هو الحكيم الخبير أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له Lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu yuhyi wa mumitu wa huwa ala kulli syai'in qadir. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan nabiyyu wa rasuluh sallallahu alaihi wasallam la nabiyya ba'da. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad wa barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama sallaita wa barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim fil alamina innaka hamidum majid. Rabbi adkhilni mudkhala sidqin wa akhrijni mukhraja sidqin waj'alni min ladunka sultanan nasira. Rabbi israh li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi a'udzubika min hamazati syayatin wa a'udzubika rabbi an yahdurun. Dear viewers, if we see the definition of flood from Wikipedia, it is an overflow of water that submerges land that is usually dry. Maybe each of us has ever undergone or some floods. It can be in a little scope or even the worst one. Usually this condition mostly happens at the place whose land close to the surface water or easy to be reached by the surface water. Just say river, lake, or the biggest one, the sea or the beaches. Flood is a disaster that hit many cities, countrysides, or regions in the world at every arrival of rainy season every year. From year to year, this disaster does not reduce in intensity, even higher. Even there are some big cities in the world have been foreseen as a whole to be soaked by water in a couple of years to go, owing to flood. We need not blame anyone with the occurrence of this disaster, just introspect ourselves to see whether we have taken part in inviting the disaster to come or not. Then find the actual roots of the causes to be followed up is the thing that need to be done. Maybe many experts in forestry blames that the reduction of forest sites whose function to absorb the stock of rain discharge as the major cause of flooding in many places in this world. If we examine further, all of it do have a point, but what efforts have been made by the concerned government to preserve the forest in question? The implementation of reforestation may have been done a lot to reduce the effects of flooding, but apparently it did not help so much. There is the reason that motivate me, which called me up to express my ideas that hopefully will be useful for the concerned parties, the authorized one, in getting the solution for this problem. Regardless of whether or not they will realize or appreciate what I suggest, at least whatever I tell through this video could be such a consideration for them sometime in the future to anticipate the disaster which might follow. Especially at the time of this video created, flooding has been hitting many regions in Indonesia and in many other parts of the whole world. Of course, the application of the idea or theory can be done later or after the floods recede or when the drought strikes. If we look further, dear viewers, the floods that have undergone the areas mentioned occurred naturally, regardless of the size of the reduction of deforestation or bad things that have been done by few irresponsible people in many places. How come? Because the main cause of all of this is the full state of water discharge flowed to the rivers from upstream to downstream. Maybe at the upstream of rivers, forests or farmlands are the mainstay to pull back the rainstock to flow back into the ground. But what about at the downstream area? We cannot just blame deforestation as the main cause of this flooding. But we must also see the increasing number of facts that are made from the development of many buildings in many places, which is also the trigger for the reduction of the places that should have been taken as the place to absorb water to send back deep to the ground. For the concrete buildings surrounding have prevented the water to set back into the ground. Consequently, all rain deposits discharge enormously flowing to the rivers. And the river, on where the accumulation of the water from the rain accumulated before finally flowing to the sea, have certain size which only can accommodate a certain volume of water. Well, if the rainwater which enters the river is no longer in accordance with the capacity of the river, it is the time for flooding everywhere. Improving drainage is only a little step to address on this problem, because the water channel serves only to drain the water from one location to the river, which eventually empties into the sea. For normal rainfall, dredging or ditches or ditch improvements will be helpful enough to channel flows of water which is accumulated from the rain. But in the big rain conditions, precisely on this situation will make the river more quickly overflowed, for the water volume is getting full shorter from all directions. On the other hand, the efforts of making the lungs for the cities, there's green areas in many cities on where there are many trees planted, do not work much to reduce this problem, because if we assume the plot as the water in a bucket, once more, if we assume the flood as the water in a bucket, the one which will be absorbed by the urban forest is not more than just one cup or just one glass, while the remainder will overflow everywhere, become a great flood. To make the water of the rain can go back, flow deeply into the ground, instead of flowing to the rivers or streams, there is one way to do. That is by building or digging wells, container for absorbing the accumulation of the rain in all places. The wells can be made at two kinds of locations. At some points along the water channels, and at each building site in every region. But one thing to remember, the well in question should not be casted intact, but shaped like a bulkhead sparks of a kerosene stove, punched in all of its surface, so that the overwater into these wells will be directly absorbed by the soil. Along with an article which once published mediated this problem, some time ago which suggested a discourse to raise taxes on the use of underground water for those who use bore well, which seem to reach a depth of 250 meters. It is only a matter of reason among the frustration parties who are unable to increase the quantity of underground water. In fact, with the increasing number of those who make the wells drilled, the more rapid circulation of underground water of the old with the new will occur. And until now, at the time I make this video, I've never heard any dry wells in Jakarta or other cities in the world due to the condition of the continuous taking the underground to be consumed by public, especially for the well which are made at the places close to the location of surface water, like a river, lake, pond, and so on. And actually, automatically, it is also be a bit much will minimize the amount of flooding which may occur in a region, for the groundwater that has been sucked will be replaced with the new ones from seepage of rainwater and other surface water, like the water on flowing rivers, lakes, pond, wetland, and so forth. It is degrounded. If the authority obstruct the people to take advantage of this underground water, this liquid will be stagnant in the soil at the underground, and the situation is not good at all, but will harm many. The surface water, which should be returned into the ground smoothly, will be hampered a bit much due to no space to fill in the earth. As a result, it will only flow on the surface, which end later in a disaster, flood. This means that the underground water must be used, and in conjunction with this, we also have to make every effort to make the water which has been used soon be replaced with the new supply, new water. Behind all of the facts above, it is also must be remembered that in dry season, particularly in the long dry season, continuous exploitation of the underground water reserves will indeed be able to drain out the availability of this source, the source of life. But this situation only will occur until the arrival of the rainy season. Afterwards, the water discharged below the soil surface will be replaced. And once again, this condition only will occur at the location on which the underground water exploitation is close to the accumulation of the surface water. The problem now in many regions, especially in urban areas, water catchment areas which are expected to be the place to restore the surface water into or down the soil decrease significantly. Consequently, the places which function as the ones for the natural water catchment areas, only a few remain, like at the location of along the river or channel which is not made permanently or casted. And in the reality, the amount of water discharged which can be absorbed by the soil or ground at such sites is very little in quantity if we compare with the surrounding area which have already been filled with buildings that shut out the land surface as well as locking the natural places which will increase the water reserves in question. To overcome this situation, all these wells are needed for procurement function to return the excessive discharge of surface water into the ground. If only we could make a one-time 1 meter size well with a depth of 22 to 33 meters, then the well will be able to accommodate 22 to 33 meter cubic water discharged to the brim. From observation on such wells, the water accumulation in the wells usually will not be full in any rainy season if the water flow is sufficient to be derived from a single location in a particular area. That is why this kind of wells have to be built in all places. If these wells could be built in each and every location, that the extent of 1,000 meters square in the area of 1 million meters square, if we can make 1,000 wells, which means 22,000 to 33,000 meter cubic of water can be returned to the ground every hour. If the land need time about 1 hour to absorb all water from these absorbing wells, you can count by yourself. If the well can be built in every 200 meter square area, much water will be able to be returned to the ground in much shorter time. It would have more leverage to gain if the parties who have authority in this case can realize the wells which have a greater breadth and depth. If the realization of these wells can be done by the government in more structured in terms of amounts in each place in this country, calculated based on the local needs, depending on the amount of rainfall in the region every year, I believe its re-existence can avoid the places where the wells are constructed for a large flood. Realizing the first step from this project can be started from the areas where the government buildings, either which have already built or that will be developed. Then in the areas which are owned by private property whose lots are more than 999 meters square, then come to the community in overall. Admittedly, the provision of the facilities like this will take quite a lot budget if it is addressed to the government. But if the government can issue some regulations or even laws which govern the procurement of the rainwater absorption wells existence like this, where the location of the building located at 1,000 meters square, or if possible at 200 meters square sites, especially in the areas prone to flooding, then the procurement will be addressed by the respective owners in intended location. And one more thing in mind is financial losses that must be spent to build the infrastructure were not the worst when compared with the losses caused by the natural disasters, either by the government itself or by the people. If the spread of the wells can be realized, the benefits will be gained. Besides being able to minimize the risk of flood that might hit, the water of the rain accumulated or absorbed through these wells will ultimately increase the underground water reserves in the areas of the wells. Practically, if the upstream areas of procurement produce these wells, then those who are on the river downstream will be easier to get clean water from dark wells. One more thing that must be considered in making this rainwater reservoir: the relevant parties will also have to provide adequate safety for each well, so it will not endanger others. And making the wells that formed in the spark bulkhead at kerosene stove is a secure form from the collapse of the wells due to the earthquake that happen a lot in certain regions or countries. When we talk about when the best time to make these water absorption wells, the answer is of course in the dry season. because at the time of raining occurs, the wells will function instantly. Dear viewers, flood is indeed unfortunate. For some classes, it is such punishment. There also is a plague, exams, and there also function as a warning to mankind. Let us just say them in an acronym: be prepared. Bala, punishment, reprimand, exam, and disaster. Bala is the plight that befell someone who has no sin, but since he had many clothes or hang out with the sinners, he is exposed to the sap when the people nearby are punished by Allah. Punishment in terms of flood, or it could be another disaster in general, are the misery further put on those who are sinners. Reprimand is a bad event imposed by Allah to a person or group of people whose way of life has somewhat deviated from the ones which have been lined on that after getting the reprimand, he or they will return to the straight way. Then, exam is the bad event that befall a person who is loved by Allah, on whose purpose is to look at what proximity to his creator is. And lastly, the disaster is the bad events that befall a person or a group of people or creatures which is already worth or time to happen. For instance, if deemed the cause of the flooding is due to indiscriminate failings of forests everywhere, and therefore blockage of water channel scum, this is disaster because it is appropriate to occur, but behind all of Allah's purpose to provide the disaster, there is no prohibition for us to try to counteract all the disaster that come as long as we can. There will be no outcome before we do certain efforts. From all things that I have mentioned, a conclusion can be drawn. To avoid flooding, do not let the rainwater flow into the river or sea, but make it flow into the ground. And to apply it, the best way is to make the wells which absorbing the water of the rain. Once again, I say the conclusion. To avoid flooding, do not let the rainwater flows into the river or sea, but make it flow into the ground. And to apply it, the best way is to make the wells which absorbing the water of the rain. Maybe later on, you do some researches or whatever dealing with the video that I made in this time, but the concept of minimizing the effect of flooding remain. Make the water flows into the ground. Never let the water flows into the river or sea. That's it. That's all what I want to express, dear viewers. Hopefully will be useful for you and for all of us. See you in the next videos.